each other where we want more reliable data, but on the same token, we have a lot of legislation that's trying to make it protect the privacy of the consumer even more. So it must complicate matters.
Yeah, absolutely. In Europe, before CCPA in California, there was GDPR in Europe. It's been in place for a few years now, and still ongoing growing pains. But essentially, that's protecting the consumer's identity, it's protecting the consumer's private information and so on. So then how do you glean a data set to be able to do certain different things? Well, through anonymization and pseudonymization, there's ways to do that and still be able to use the data for training and learning in AI technologies. But it's a very good point. It's a very tricky balance to take.
Right, more so than before. And the companies that are collecting the most data are the ones that are the most scrutiny. So that's, right, as you mentioned, one of them.
Maybe a quick point on that. I think from what we're seeing at the World Bank Group when we work with developing countries, they see that tension quite clearly, in the sense that when you have more access to data, companies are able to develop products that are actually really quite helpful for economic growth. I mentioned access to finance. This requires companies to be able to mine data from a lot of different sources. On the other hand, the data privacy issues are not well understood by policymakers today, or even by consumers within developing countries. So at the World Bank Group, we have a big effort to try to help be the voice of the poor, to help them sort of say, hey, this is where your data is going, this is how it should be protected. But we're working quite closely now with policymakers to articulate what are the pros and cons of different regulatory frameworks. We're not sure exactly what is the right framework. I think for every country it's going to be quite different. For example, in Cambodia, we had a discussion with the government there, and they were quite clear that they were much more interested in economic growth than data privacy, just at this point in time. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's still an emerging issue, but I think it's something that we're trying to help policymakers deal with.
So I mentioned the consumer and I mentioned the workplace. So we talked about industries that could be impacted. Which consumer-facing industries, and you've mentioned some, we've heard about health and finance. For those of us out there, our consumer experience, what are the industries that are most immediately be impacted by AI in the next couple of years? I mean, where would we see significantly new or different changes?
I mean, from personal perspective, this is probably the biggest, and we've already seen changes with respect to photography and so on. We're going to see changes in different other processing that's going on in the phone to make them faster and be able to regulate the battery's length and all these kind of things. But I think the challenge is that I don't think there's going to be any one area that's even untouched by AI at some point in the next 10 years. I think we're going to see pretty much all industry, especially the consumer, being affected some way by AI.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think it's every industry in the consumer area, and I think it's when you take a look at where you have very data-intensive types of workloads or types of applications, that's where you'll find AI applied first. And this is where I say the customer service industry is probably the first. Like everything that you deal with, from your phone to any kind of purchase that you make in retail to any kind of hospitality, always has some sort of customer service element. That is probably where we see the most adoption right now. Then, if you, like I mentioned, if you take it into anywhere where there is knowledge workers, and if you take the case of like a lawyer spends on average 8 hours trying to figure out how to be able to create a contract. That is very labor intensive and not really using the skills and expertise of a lawyer itself. If you can use AI, like Legalmation does with Watson, and reduce that from hours and weeks to minutes, that allows the lawyer to be a lot more productive. So I think you're gonna see this in consumer industries. You're gonna see it applied in almost everything that you touch.
So one thing I was wondering, I'm sorry.
I was going to say one area we're seeing a lot of potential, or that could be very fast moving, is online marketplaces. In Africa, we looked at a study where by 2025 we could see 3 million new jobs created from online marketplaces. And this is really because AI is helping to drive the connection between buyers and sellers. And particularly in Africa, you have a lot of, the economy is informal. You have a lot of local entrepreneurs, people who can make products. How do you connect them to both domestic, regional, and even international markets? I think AI can really drive the development of that. We've seen that happen in China through Alibaba. We've obviously seen it happen in the US through Amazon and others. And so we think this could be an industry that could really be, you could see a lot of progress on the consumer-facing side.